rich? What makes most people rich? So I kind of go to the data. I came from really middle class, we didn't have money all the time. I remember what it was like to not have money. I remember what it was like when my debit card, I was a little worried stuff wouldn't go through at the grocery store. And I didn't like that feeling. And so I kind of started looking around and I was like, wait a second, where do people have money? And after being in finance for whatever it is, 15 years, I'm going to give away my age, I realized people that have money have one thing, ownership. So the data is really clear on this. 70% of millionaires are self-made, which is interesting. I used to think maybe you just inherit it. Did they just get lucky? And then 68% of millionaires have some form of ownership. They have actually bought a business or have equity in a business or built a business. And so when I realized that, I was like, the problem is I don't have a brilliant idea. I don't know how to make money. I don't have any money to make money. But at least you have step one, which is if you don't have ownership, you're probably never going to be free financially. You got to get some skin in the game. That doesn't mean that you have to become an entrepreneur. It's really hard to do that. It sucks many days. You know this very well. There's Fridays when you're never going to make payroll, and that is like a deep, terrible, dark hurt, actually. But if you realize ownership is the name of the game, then you should probably obsess on one thing more than anything else, which is learn the language of money. And back when I was young, I was a journalist originally, made $0. And I realized that I had no idea why I had opportunities and ability to make some money. And let's say the women I was covering at the time in Juarez, they call it La Ciudad de Muerte, right? The city of death, which is where women are mutilated and raped and brutalized and found murdered all over the city, every single day, thousands of women a year. There were many that had the last name Sanchez. My last name happens to be Sanchez. I was like, what's the difference between us? Is it that I'm American? No, that's not it alone. I think it's also that I had some financial tools, and money is a pushback against other people's architecture of your life. And it makes people care about you one way or the other, which is sad. But the truth of the matter is, if you are poor, you have no power. And anybody who's been poor before knows that is true. You got to go where the game is played. So the first thing I tell you is if you don't have any cash, you need to find a way to figure out how to speak the language of money. And that probably means you maybe go work in finance like I did. You get with a company that has smart leaders like Jay, where you can actually go and learn from them, and you obsess on, can I become fluent in the thing that nobody talks about in the US, because money is supposed to be the root of all evil.
Yeah, you shared a statistic with me that I thought was mind-blowing, that 62% of Americans don't want to talk about money.
Yeah.
That is so scary, but it's also not surprising because, like you just said, we've created this narrative that money is the root of all evil. And it was so fascinating because someone actually said this to me, where if you look up the actual reference, it says love of money is the root of all evil.
I never knew that.
Yeah.
I do wonder sometimes, how do we get programmed these ways? Because if you think about it, it's like, what are the three things you're not supposed to talk about? Politics, religion, money. Now, politics and religion, maybe I could understand. You could offend somebody. I believe this religion, you believe this political slant. And if we could collide, that could be bad. But when it comes to money, who's like, no, I wish everybody was poor. Why wouldn't we be able to talk about it? And the only thing that I can determine from that is that every time we get a little bit more ownership, a little bit more money, we become harder to control. And when you're harder to control, big institutions and largely our governments, they don't like that. You want a controllable populace by and large. And I think that is a big reason why people don't talk about money. It's actually that we have been programmed to be more malleable sheep in many ways. Not because people are evil at the top, but because once we get power, we humans are a little funny. We don't like to give it up. No matter who we are, I would probably be the same. And so that centralization of power, we start to think, I know better. You poor person, let me give you some charity. You can't figure it out. And instead, we should be saying, you are just as capable as I am, and I would probably be you if I lived your life. And so instead, why don't I transfer some knowledge, because that's where money starts.
Yeah. What about people right now who are looking at the situation and just like, the economy's in a bad place, we're super worried? Paint us a picture of where America is right now.
Well, let's talk first. We'll talk about how it's tough, and I'll be honest, and then we can talk about solutions. So I promise I won't leave you in a doom scroll. But here's the truth of what's happening in the world right now. if you're young people today are upset about what's happening in the world around them, and I understand why. You have wage stagnation. So we basically have not made any more money. And in fact, this generation, Gen Z, is the first generation where at their same age as their parents, they're making less money, not more. Problem is their university degrees are 3 to 4x more expensive. Oh, by the way, so is housing. Wait a second, inflation is at a degree in which my dollar today is worth even substantially less than even 5 years ago. On top of that, yeah, we have all these jobs open. 7 million working age men supposedly are unemployed at this moment right now, even though the jobs report says that there's so many jobs. Are the jobs real? Well, largely not. They're private sector. They're not private sector. They're public sector. They're government jobs. And so young people are like, wait a second, I can't live. I can't eat. Groceries more expensive. And that's real, actually. And so the people that are making fun of young people in TikToks, when they cry about their job being difficult, I don't really vibe with that, because the math says it's hard right now. And not just for young people, but I think it's important to talk about them. And the truth of the matter is, though, that in any market we can make money. And so although it's really difficult out there, there's like one silver lining that I've kind of been screaming from the rooftops for the past 3 years. And people, I think, are starting to see it, which is that we are thankfully, I think, going to have a marriage between baby boomers and young people that would be very unexpected. So right now, and historically, young people have said, okay, boomer, you messed up our economy, boomer. You're not employing me, boomer. You don't understand my life. You listen to the music that young people like. They don't like that generation in a lot of ways. Then the baby boomers are like, you guys are quiet quitting. You're not working very hard. Get out of my basement. And so these two generations have been at war in some ways, like a quiet war. And now, I think, with the transfer of ownership that we're seeing, and we can talk about the great wealth transfer, I think we have an opportunity where the baby boomer generation, the richest generation that we have ever seen in the US, which has mimicked in all other countries around the world, by the way, that are developed countries, this generation is about to sunset. They're getting ready to retire. They're ready to move on. But they own $68 trillion in wealth in just the US. The interesting part is the young people think, well, that money must get transferred somehow, right? Does that mean I get a house? Does that mean I get a car? Does that mean I get inheritance? The problem is that money is not tied up in just assets. It's not tied up in houses and bank accounts. It, by and large, is tied up in small businesses, because baby boomers own 60% of all small businesses. And so I think we got to find a way for the young people to take over these baby boomer businesses, because otherwise, then we're in a really bad spot. Then we're Japan.